Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Tom Barrett, and I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me to hear more about the American Rescue Plan. Tonight, I'm going to talk about our first phase one allocation, which is approximately $93 million in funding to help Milwaukee continue to recover from the pandemic. I've asked a few of our partners in that plan to join me tonight and share more about what rescue plan funding will help them do. But first, I want to just take a couple minutes to talk through just how much funding is coming to the city of Milwaukee and what we can use it for. And some of this you may have heard already, but I think it certainly bears repeating because there's a lot of good information here. We have $397.4 million, and I have to thank President Biden. I have to thank here locally Senator Baldwin, Congresswoman Moore, for their tremendous leadership in making sure a significant amount of money came directly to city governments, to county governments, to school districts. This is without a doubt the largest infusion of money to local government at one time that I have seen in my many decade career. And so this was no small feat to get this through Congress. So we have, as I said, $397.4 million that's broken up into two payments of about $197 million each. We have received the first payment, $197 million, and that's basically in our accounts. And the next $197 million we can receive no sooner than approximately 1 year from May, which is when we got the first tranche of money. We have until December 31st, 2024 to fully commit those dollars. And I'm using my words carefully here because if they're committed, they still can be used after that, actually through December 31st, 2026. But we have essentially a little over 3 years now to commit those dollars. That's important because I don't think it's necessary for us to spend all of this money at once. In fact, to the contrary, the things I've tried to do throughout this is to see where we can coordinate with Milwaukee Public Schools, where we can coordinate with Milwaukee County, and most importantly, where we can coordinate with state government. And that's going to come up at a few points tonight where working with Governor Evers and his staff, we think that there's an opportunity for us to work with them and use state dollars prior to using local dollars. But one of the questions we hear most often is, what are the uses of this money? And the answer to that question is the rescue plan allows three broad uses for funding to local governments. First is revenue loss, and we're going to hear a lot more about that tonight. And this is really the first time that I've talked about this in depth. But this is an important part of what we're trying to do. And this allows for governments to avoid making budget cuts this year and in future years because of the revenue lost during the pandemic. And as I'll explain to you later, we are certainly going to be using some of those dollars as we prepare our 2022 budget. Second is public health. And this includes vaccination and boosters, contact tracing, public health information, and testing. And just this afternoon, I was in conversations with representatives from the state, and we were talking about the state's allocation and their desire to hold back some money because of the uncertainty surrounding where the COVID-19 pandemic is going to go. In other words, we know that over the last month or two, it has gotten much worse. Are we going to have to use more dollars for that? And that's something that we're keeping in mind as well. But the third area, and last but certainly not least, is economic recovery and relief. These funds can be used for a broad range of things connected to pandemic recovery. And again, as you'll see in my first phase, what I call my summer program, we've attempted to do that. We intend to do more with certain programs that we're going to present to the council probably next month as we try to see how we can allocate the first, again, $197 million. A couple things that I should point out. The rescue plan funds cannot be used for things like water and sewer infrastructure to replenish budget reserves or pensions. And all three of those are really, really important to talk about. Now, on the good news side is we believe that the infrastructure bill that now has passed the Senate and is in the House will contain significant amount of money for us to deal with water and sewer infrastructure. Most notably, I think many people are interested in what is our schedule to replace lead laterals. And that is the place where we will be focusing on trying to get funds to deal with our aging infrastructure. I like to call it our aging infrastructure because I think that's the most accurate description of what we're trying to do there. But the pensions is another issue. We have a serious pension problem here, and Congress has made it clear that they don't want us to use this money for pensions. And so obviously we're going to abide by that. Our next slide shows how I see our $197 million in Milwaukee being allocated as of now. And again, this is all very, very subject to change. Obviously, it has to be approved by the Common Council. I'm not certain what the council is going to do, but I want our residents to know what I'm interested in. And we've done this based on the surveys. We've done this based on conversations with members of the Common Council, with members of the public. But the first thing that we did do is we worked with the council to allocate $3.8 million in June for Earn and Learn, which helped a lot of young people in Milwaukee find jobs this summer. Over 1,200 young people were served. We had 80 different employers. We had served about 120 people that did this virtually. But Shaitanya Brown, who is our executive director of Employ Milwaukee, which basically handles this program for us, did a great job. She and her staff did a great job, and I want to publicly thank her for that. The next allocation after the $3.8 million is the Stronger Summer Plan. And again, I'll be talking a little bit more about that tonight. This is a $93 million that is comprised of both revenue loss and relief funding that will work right now to help Milwaukee families. And the speakers tonight I've asked to talk about those aspects of the program that they view as important and why it's relevant to them. Our budget office is planning to use some of our revenue loss and relief funds to help avoid cuts in the 2022 city budget. And this is important. As of now, we estimate that figure to be about $35 million that we will use primarily from the lost revenue account to help us with this budget. Our estimates are our total lost revenue amount for this year is going to be $53 million. And again, we estimate that we'll use approximately $35 million of that to help us with this year's budget. The last part, which has not been introduced yet and is going to be obviously subject to change and working with the Common Council, and we plan to work with the council and many partners throughout the city to make major investments in several key areas. Lead abatement, the paint aspect of this, not the infrastructure of lead laterals, but we have a lot of houses with lead paint, and we know that there are way too many kids who have elevated lead levels in their blood. And so this is a plan that we're working very closely with the health department to see what we can do to deal with those kids and those properties where there is a elevated lead level for the children. Housing is another aspect of this, and we'll hear more about this, but dealing with some properties that we own, some demolition that we want to deal with, helping with some other aspects of housing that is very important to us. And we plan to present more detail on those efforts in the very near future. I also remain very, very interested in working with our partners on early education. And this might be an area where we have to see exactly how we can work together with the state and with the Milwaukee Public Schools and us to come up with the best early education package. I'm eager to do this. But again, I think we have to be smart and see what our other potential partners or real partners are going to come to the table with as well. As we do all of this work, racial equity and inclusion has been at the heart of our planning. We saw and still see the disparate economic and health impacts COVID-19 has had on Black and Brown residents and businesses. And that's why my team has used an equity lens to look at every proposal in the Stronger Summer Plan, and we will be doing the same for the future phases of the plan as well. So again, the phase one plan addresses Milwaukee's critical need for a full recovery. A lot on employment and returning to work. Again, this is where Shaitanya and her partners come in. Affordable and sustainable housing, and you're going to hear in terms of helping renters, right to counsel, making sure that we're working with our housing authority, a lot of different areas we want to make sure that we're working there. Developing core city services. And this is why it's important for us to utilize some of this money to help us fill the gaps. Supporting small and local businesses, and you're going to hear from Marjorie later about that. Community and neighborhood health, and as I said, early childhood education. So the guests tonight that you'll hear from Kathy Henrich of MKE Tech Hub Jobs. You'll hear from Willie Hines when we talk about housing. You're also going to hear from Colleen Foley and Jeremy Simon and George Hinton when we talk about housing, and then Marjorie Rucker when we talk about business support. So I think the next step for us now is actually to move on and go to the slides. Again, as you can see, and before we leave this slide, again, I want to say, let's go back one more time here. Again, you can see these three numbers total up to $197.1 million. $53.7 million is the revenue loss. That's that offsets revenue loss during the pandemic due to economic factors and needed closures. And so that's going to help us in things like public works and libraries and 911. Public health remains a big issue. And I'm very, very concerned about where the pandemic is going to go. But we want to make sure that we've got adequate resources to sustain vaccination, testing, tracing, and making sure that our public health has the dollars it needs. The $130.8 million, I think, is really where we're going to focus on putting dollars for things like the lead abatement. There's money in here for violence prevention, jobs, small business, a lot of different aspects of this as well. So let's go to the next slide here. So I want to talk a little bit about the phase one. Again, as I said, this is $93 million. There inevitably will be changes here, and some of them are good changes that we'll be making. The community and neighborhood health, $6.6 million. And again, we're going to talk about some of these more in depth. Violence prevention. Broadband has been, for me, a perplexing issue because I thought it would be much easier to plug dollars into that. That has proved to be more challenging than I thought, but we're going to continue to work on that. We're very proud of the work we've done on eviction prevention. And so you'll be hearing more about that tonight. Again, small businesses, early childhood, vaccinations, the core services. This is the area where we've got the funds for the reckless driving reduction, which is obviously a very, very hot issue right now. We've got a very serious issue with ambulances that we're facing in certain parts of the city right now, and streetlights remains a serious issue as well. But unemployment and helping people get the skills they need in this economy is going to receive a lot of money. So we'll be talking about that again very, very soon. So let's keep going here and let's go to the different aspects of the plan. All right, so this is where I want to start out talking about how we want to use some of this, and our key partner in all of this is Employ Milwaukee. The $93 million package has $13.8 million for employment, job training, including $6 million for connecting unemployed and low wage workers with new skills and career pathways, including lead abatement certification. This is a real issue. We know we want to put literally tens of millions of dollars into lead abatement in homes, but we have to make sure we have the workers. We also want to make sure we're doing everything we can to connect the tech workers. And we see a real opportunity here for helping people, young people in particular, through a clean energy jobs effort for youth and adults. So Chaitanya, I know we didn't say we're going to call on you right away, but I am going to call on you. Is there anything you want to add in this area, since this is a lot of your stuff?
I just want to, thank you again, Mayor. Employ Milwaukee is grateful and excited about the opportunity to present our ARPA-funded projects for consideration to the Common Council. Before I go into highlights about the projects, I want to emphasize that what we propose in our workforce development projects all follow an equity-focused vision with common themes. We have focused on long-term, systemic, impactful change versus short-term fixes, because we've seen all too often money come down, people get opportunities. When the money is gone, there's no pathway for the individuals to go forward. service delivery within our neighborhoods by engaging a broad range of community and faith-based organizations and training providers that are trusted and valued by city residents. Most funding is going directly to the city residents through wages, wraparound support services, and upskilling as part of what we propose. Investing in and prioritizing youth of color, ensuring work experience is linked to employers ready to address diversity, equity, and investing in inclusion that have in-demand job openings for quality jobs, breaking down the digital divide to ensure that nobody is left behind in this global economy. Through the ARPA Workforce Development Initiatives that Employ Milwaukee has proposed, we see that we can work together to reach this vision through lead abatement projects, as you mentioned, Mayor, connected to credential training and real career opportunities, wages to trainees, job seekers, and other workers that go directly back into the community, because that's really, really important. Building wealth in our neighborhoods that have been disproportionately affected. Skilled training programs in IT, financial services, and other high demand industries that provide real on-ramps to individuals looking to compete in the global market. A focus on clean energy job training is something we're really excited about, including a career exploration hub in the heart of our city-centric city. Additional apprenticeship opportunities. Apprenticeships are things that we know work for both youth and adults, so that upskilling happens directly on the job through paid work, and work with employers that are ready to address opportunities and equity in our community. New virtual services that are accessible and supported by basic IT skills training devices and connectivity. And although workforce is not the sole answer to racial and ethnic inequities or disparities, we see workforce training and education as critical tactics in addressing employment, income, and wealth disparities that preclude too many people of color from economic and family security. And I brought Kathy Henrich, the CEO of MKE Tech Hub Coalition, who is one of Employ Milwaukee's value IT partner organizations, working to inclusively double tech talent in the Milwaukee region. And we saw that during this pandemic, we had so much demand, and it's still there for jobs in the tech industry. And that is why that's one key component of what we propose in our ARPA plan. And I'll turn it over to Kathy to just talk a little bit more about that.
Look, you're on mute, Kathy, I think. Whoop. Well, we're still not hearing you.
My apologies.
There you go.
I want to thank Shaitania and Mayor Barrett for having me on the call today. And thank you, Shaitania, for introducing the coalition, which is a nonprofit focused on inclusively doubling tech talent here in the region. And I just want to reiterate, in first quarter, Milwaukee was actually listed as the fastest growing city in the country for tech jobs. In second quarter, we again outpaced the growth in tech jobs. And, it was exactly this issue that created the need for the Milwaukee Tech Hub Coalition. Forward-looking leaders came together and formed this in order to address these needs that we saw coming from an economic perspective, to make sure that those great jobs are here within our community. And the second thing is to make sure that we were creating life-changing jobs for all, and creating a diverse and inclusive workforce that drives innovation here in the Milwaukee region. So with that said, we have invested in K through 20 and reskilling initiatives, specifically into the apprenticeship model. And we've had great partnership with Employ Milwaukee and with the Department of Workforce Development as we have taken forward apprenticeship models. That apprenticeship models through the ARPA Workforce Development Initiative that Employ Milwaukee has proposed, it allows there to be wages to trainees, to job seekers and others to go back, that'll go directly back into the community to bring wealth into the neighborhoods, especially those that have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. The skills training program in IT creates a pipeline that allows us to take individuals and put them into high demand industry and provides on-ramps to those individuals into a globally competitive job landscape. And apprenticeship opportunities create opportunities for both youth and adults so that upskilling can happen in the marketplace through paid work that employers are ready to address. And we're very excited about that ability to expand that pipeline approach. And then finally, the new virtual services make that accessible through basic job and IT skills training, devices, connectivity, so that nobody is left behind in this increasingly high-tech kind of post-COVID economy. So with that, again, I want to say thank you, apologize for the mute, and I'll turn it back.
Okay, thanks, Kathy, and thank you, Shaitania. I appreciate that very, very much. So I think we can jump to the next slide, but I appreciate that presentation. So $30.4 million is what we have allocated in this package towards affordable and sustainable housing. And you can see that we take this portion of the challenge we face in Milwaukee very seriously. As some of you may know, several years ago, I put forth a promise that we'd have 10,000 new or renovated homes in 10 years. And this allows us to head this way. So I'm just going to run through a couple of these things, and then I'm going to ask Willie Hines to talk about West Lawn, which is a very key component of this. But when we talk about $2 million for shovel-ready affordable housing projects, one of the issues that we're facing right now is that a number of projects that we have some gaps in them. And these are projects that are for affordable housing. And because of the pandemic and because of rising costs, all of a sudden they're in jeopardy. So we want those to get over the finish line. And so this is where that money would go. We also recognize the demand and the need for residential energy efficiency upgrades, particularly in the central city. People pay a high percentage of their income, their disposable income, towards energy, and we want to do what we can to help them be more efficient. At the bottom is the $3 million for additional code compliance loans, which is maybe one of my favorite programs in all of city government. We're about to have our 500th loan that goes out through this program to help people stay in their homes. And they get these loans, which will be then paid back when they sell the home. But it allows them to fix their roofs, fix other parts of their house, their porches, whatever, that are no longer in compliance with our code. The average age of this is probably people in their late 50s, early 60s. They've probably been in their home 15 to 18 years, low income people, but they're in homes. And I think that they deserve to have decent housing. But when we talk about decent housing, the place that I think we have to start in Milwaukee is with our public housing authority. And as some of you may know, I served in Congress before I became mayor of the city of Milwaukee. And I served on the Financial Institutions and Housing Committee for 3 terms. And what I saw members of Congress who would basically sprint away from their housing authorities because they were so embarrassed by them. I took the opposite view. I thought our housing authority did a great job here. I still think our housing authority is really, really solid in Milwaukee. And all you have to do right now is to go up at the neighborhood of basically 60th and Silver Spring and just west of it there, and you're going to see West Lawn and West Lawn Gardens and the changes that are occurring there. For the first time, the housing authority has come to the city and said, can you help us fill this gap? We fill the gap with private developers. I'm thinking we should help this as well. And so I'm going to ask Willie Hines, who is the acting director of the housing authority, to talk a little bit about why this is an important proposal. Willie?
Thank you, Mayor Barrett, for selecting the housing authority to be a recipient of their summer ARP grant dollars. Obviously, housing is essential, and without housing, adequate quality, dignified housing, all else falls apart. And so a part of what we're doing in the Choice Neighborhood Initiative, we are focused on West Lawn area and the boundaries of Sherman Boulevard to 76th Street, Mill Road to Villard, a large area where we are transforming that entire neighborhood. While we're doing that, we're also working with our vouchers, giving people tenant vouchers to help address many of their housing needs. Obviously, we received 121 emergency vouchers that were made available to veterans, the homeless, and to those families who are in dire need. And we've established a number of partners to make this possible. We're working with Milwaukee Metropolitan Fair Housing, Milwaukee County Apartment Association, many of our Section 8 landlords. We're working both with legal aid and legal action in order to address many of the housing needs, public housing needs in particular. As we focus on West Lawn, the item there really is we're 90% completed with the project and need only 6% of dollars to help address those matters up there. It will replace 141 affordable rental housing, 185 market rate rental, and affordable home ownership properties. And with that project, not only does it provide quality housing, but it gives us the opportunity to create jobs. $46 million worth of construction activities were directed directly to EBE firms, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and they've received about, I think that's 65% of the work, which equates to $46 million. So not only are we building quality housing, we're also putting money resources in the hands of those who are less fortunate, often don't get included on projects. The other element that we will be using dollars for is infrastructure improvement. We've built out the project and yet need to address some of the infrastructure, which will also help offset some of the flooding issues that occur on the northwest side of Milwaukee as well. We also want to make certain that and the dollars will be used in this context, not only for bricks and mortar, but we have family self-sufficiency programs where we've worked with residents to secure educational opportunities, to be able to buy homes, to also be able to buy vehicles to get their way to get cars and get their way to work, as well as to be able to help them to continue their ongoing education. And so while housing is so important and the resources that the mayor has allocated will allow us to deal with those matters, the reality also being is that it will give us the opportunity to also build the character of our residents. And so these dollars are so important for us to move forward. And we're very thankful and appreciative that the mayor included us in the summer plan. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all that played a role to make this possible.
Well, thank you, Willie. And I think it's important for people, again, to contact the council and let them know how important this item is. I think one of the challenges with West Lawn in this is that there's a perception that because the Housing Authority receives federal dollars, and in this case, as Willie said, this has been financed in part by a $31 million Choice Neighborhood grant, which is a very competitive grant, and we're proud that we got it. But the perception is, well, they don't need this money. They don't need this money. But I look at it differently. I look at this as what can we do for the residents of this city who are low-income residents who live in this area. And again, if you drive through here, you're going to be floored by how respectable this housing is. That this is not what people associate with low-income people, and that doesn't mean that it's grandiose or it doesn't mean that it's opulent. It just means that it's respectful. And I believe very strongly that we need to do what we can to support this effort. So I stand firmly behind this. Congresswoman Moore does a great job helping us get these dollars back. And I think that this is an area that certainly we should be making this investment. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get this over the finish line, but we know it's going to be a challenge. So let's go to the next slide. As I said, over $30 million we have directed towards housing, and eviction prevention is critical to pandemic recovery and growing equity. And in addition to that $30 million that we have in this package, we've already spent north of $15 million in eviction prevention. And in a few minutes, I'm going to have Steve and perhaps George talk about that. But I want to talk about a couple other things and have Jeremy and Colleen weigh in here. The summer plan that we've got has 3 allocations that specifically stabilize rental housing. $1.2 million to expedite housing choice vouchers that again are available through the Housing Authority. $1.2 million to sustain one-stop services at Rental Housing Resource Center. We want to help people so that they know where to go to get that help. And third, Colleen Foley has done a phenomenal job in pushing forth an idea of right to counsel, and she's worked and had success at the county. We want to be a partner in this. I think the state might even be a partner. We believe that if people have right to counsel, that a lot of evictions can be avoided. So Jeremy, do you want to weigh in first, and then Colleen, do you want to weigh in, and then Then we'll go to Steve. George is here by then. We'll bring him in as well. Jeremy, we'll start with you.
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. So United Way has been leading an initiative called Safe and Stable Homes for a couple of years. That's a multi-sector partnership where we work with philanthropy, nonprofit providers, the government, the city, the county, and other entities to achieve a single goal, and that's to eliminate family homelessness in our community by 2025. And part of that includes, identifying and funding what we know are proven and evidence-based strategies to achieve that goal. I think anyone who is familiar with the work of Matthew Desmond, who spends time in our community and is aware of how conditions have changed during the pandemic, is cognizant that eviction continues to be a massive issue. In a normal year, about 14,000 families face an eviction proceeding in our small claims court. Over the past, how many months, maybe 20, that has been kind of frozen as a consequence of the CDC's moratorium on evictions. We've had several extensions and we know it's ending soon. And we are anticipating an unprecedented amount of eviction filings in our community. But fortunately, there's a number of partners that have been working in this space for a long time to identify some best strategies to where possible, avoid evictions. And if not, make sure that they are done with humility and with dignity and grace, and that people are given the opportunity to secure safe and stable housing. And one of those initiatives includes Right to Counsel. We are working closely with Legal Aid, with Legal Action of Wisconsin as well, partners at the county and other entities to bring this forward. And I guess I'll throw it to Colleen to speak a little bit more about the model, why it's important and what it will mean in our community.
Sure, thank you, Jeremy. And hi, everyone. Thank you, Mayor, for having me. So the a silver lining of the pandemic is widespread recognition that we can and must do better. And in particular, it's time for Milwaukee to change the culture of evictions that disproportionately impact communities of color and women and children in particular. So this rescue plan funding will help get us there by funding Right to Counsel and other eviction prevention efforts, such as the rental assistance that George Hinton and his team puts out there, and community advocates, as well as the Rental Housing Resource Center, which is located in my building and is a consortium of advocates for landlords and tenants. So I do want to applaud United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County for their early leadership in funding the Right to Counsel initiative, as well as the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors and County Executive David Crowley, who together collectively enacted and signed legislation to fund and support Right to Counsel back in January. No, not January, June. And so ultimately, in funding Right to Counsel, that will enable the court system to more fairly, equitably, and efficiently handle evictions, and will change the system so one side doesn't dominate, which is the current model. As Jeremy referenced, approximately 3% of tenants are currently represented. Right to Counsel would bring that number up to 20 to 25% with other factors involved. It's a proven model. We've spent the past year consulting with the city of Cleveland, which is a sister city, and we have the benefit of learning from them and using their model as a blueprint. What this program would do is expedite resolutions by providing dedicated counsel to advise tenants of their rights and their obligations, and it would reduce challenges to future housing issues for tenants because it would keep an eviction off their record. It would enable the lawyers to seal the record, because with every eviction that you get, your options for affordable and safe housing decline. Additionally, it would reduce reliance on congregate settings, particularly now as the Delta variant ramps up. And that's good for individuals and families, and that's good for all of us. So overall, long-term, it would reduce evictions and the terrible repercussions that go with them for families in terms of employment and education and health. So I applaud the mayor for his recommendations on the rescue plan funding. Legal Aid has been hard at work to launch a Right to Counsel with a September 1st launch date. And this funding would ensure that Right to Counsel is sustainable for the long haul and that it does the most good for the most people.
Thank you, Colin.
Oh, real quick before you hand it to George, I want to point out also, again, everybody believes really strongly in this work and all the resources that are being dedicated towards housing security. And specifically over the next 3 to 5 years, we're committed to investing at least $1.5 billion of our resources and time and commitment into Right to Counsel to ensure it's successful. I think it's really going to be a massive improvement to help change the culture around housing in Milwaukee and ensure that we're pursuing a more equitable, just, and fair housing system for everyone. And then I'll hand it over to George to highlight some more elements.
George, you're on. George, are you with us?
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
I had a hard time getting off mute there. I guess I was trying to be forcibly quiet. Anyway, thank you, Mayor, for this opportunity to be with all of my colleagues across the community around this wonderful funding that's really done a lot of great things in our community. SDC, as a community action agency from Milwaukee County, has participated in the rental assistance process since 2020. Being one of the larger CAP agencies in the state, when the state first did it on the first run, we were able to put $6.2 million into the county. And then once that ran out, the city tapped into us to continue that process. And by the end of 2020, we put another almost $13 million out into the community. Since that time, we have taken the next round of funding for rent assistance, and as of today, we have put in $9 million into rent assistance into the community, Milwaukee specifically, and being able to help over 2,000 families. Just this last week, our goal is to try to put out $1 million a week. This last week, we put out $1.3 million. So we are working hard to really work with a lot of people who are in need. As others have said, there's thousands of people on our waiting list, and we continue to work with them. We have come up with not only online processing, but indoor on hands, asking people to come in if they need help. Help them get their situation in hand, either paying back rent or going forward. We work very much with legal aid to ensure that if there's anybody in the eviction process, that we put them in front of the line. And we work with community advocates to make, who is also putting out rental assisted funding, to make sure that we're coordinating our efforts to ensure that everybody has fair opportunity to the funds. As a community action agency, SDC is involved in many parts of the crisis initiative, including food security, which we do with the city, in which we are feeding the homeless in hotels right now. We've been doing that for the last year and a half. We've been able to feed hundreds of our citizens in the community and provide them food and keep them stable and keep them safe during the pandemic. SDC is a full service agency. As a commission, as a CAP agency, we have many services, and we believe in integrated wraparound services. We are in the process, and will be in the process of reaching back out to these individuals that we have helped to see if we can help stabilize their income and stabilize their situation so that they don't need to come back for help again. As a community, as a commission, I can speak for our board of commissioners, and they are fully engaged in trying to look at why these things are happening, continue to happen, and how we can do a better job as a community to ensure it doesn't continue to happen, as we look at those systems that may be causing people to stay in perpetual poverty, or in some cases, generational poverty. So we're real proud of what we do, Mayor, and I want to just say I think we've got a lot of work to do. I too am afraid when the moratorium goes off, it's going to be pretty bad out here. When it went off for those couple of days, our numbers jumped by 2,000 clients. So there's a lot of people out there that still haven't reached out to us, but there are people who are in the system right now, and some that are coming through for a second time. So other than that, that's all I have to report for SDC, unless there's some other questions.
Good, that's good. Steve, is there anything you want to add here?
Well, I just would like to wrap with both Jeremy, Colleen, and George are bringing to the table is that there's such a strong need for housing stability and eviction prevention. George is on the front end of helping families and individuals with their rent assistance through the Mayor program, but this all has to work together, in which we're expediting housing choice vouchers through the Housing Authority. The Rental Housing Resource Center is a vital key to the long haul of addressing all of our issues by creating this one stop for services. People need to be able to address their own issues, not a template, but one-on-one for their issues. And Mayor, this 1.2 million that you're producing for the Rental Housing Resource Center is key to that service. And also right to counsel. The county has already seen that this is a necessity and has already funded it. And we're looking to increase that capacity with United Way, which is also bringing and leveraging, as you stated on, as at the beginning of this isn't all about this money, it's about leveraging. And leveraging is what United Way has come in and said they're willing to help stretch these dollars out. And with our friends at Legal Aid, we definitely will have the backing of counsel. So I just wanted to highlight that this is, as George said, is going to be a precedent that will, in September, will even start to, stretch tenfold or fivefold or threefold, depending on how we address it. And this housing stability is definitely dollars that will be well spent.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, well, I want to thank, and I think you can see by the 4 speakers that we have had here, how much of an emphasis we're placing on housing and how much of an emphasis we're placing on employment and training. Those to me are 2, if not the 2 biggest issues, those are certainly 2 of the biggest issues that we're dealing with. Obviously the lead issue, particularly with the homes, and that's going to be funded in the next proposal I have to the council that will be coming next month. But we're very proud of what we're done here. I think we need to let the council know how important all these aspects are. They fit together. As Steve was saying, this is really about partnerships. It's about leveraging, and we feel that we've really put ourselves in a good spot in trying to leverage federal dollars, state dollars, local dollars. But we want to make sure people know that we've got a piece of the action as well. So that's why we've done what we've done. So thank you to all, and we're going to jump ahead now to the next section of the summer package as well. So these might be a little bit of a surprise to people in a way, but I want to talk about why they're so important. And I also want to make sure that people understand creatively using different aspects of this money. You can see the asterisk there explains to you that all these are funded through the revenue loss provisions of ARP. Let's go back to that. So we lost $53 million. We're going to put $35 million into the budget. Here, we're going to be using about $18 million. So that basically is what that $53 million revenue loss is going towards. Primarily plugging the budget holes, $35 million, and then having this $18 million going for $2 million for emergency medical response, $10 million for street lighting, and $6.2 million to combat reckless driving. And just on each of those briefly, we have a very serious problem right now with our ambulance service here in the city of Milwaukee. Many people know, many people don't know that we actually have 2 different ambulance services. We've got advanced life support. Those are our red fire engines or fire vehicles, if you will. Those are for what I would call life-threatening situations. Those are peopled by members of our fire department. And for a very serious issue, if it's advanced life support, they will be taken to the hospital in those red vehicles. But there are others, the basic life support vehicles. These are the private ambulance providers in the city of Milwaukee. And we have divided the city into several parts of a quadrant. We've already had 1 dropout. We've had another one merge into another one. So we're essentially down to 2 ambulance private ambulance services, we're very, very concerned that they are losing money and that they will pull out of this program. It's that straightforward. We cannot allow them to pull out of this program. The state legislature has acted on one of the rare instances where it acted on a bipartisan basis to increase some of the reimbursement rates, Medicare reimbursement rates as they're tied to Medicaid. But we have worked with them closely. This is going to allow us to do some basic life support from the fire department, but also ultimately to help these private ambulance services as well. What's not reflected here is about $2.7 million that we will try to direct towards those companies to make sure, and the ones that are most affected are ones that are serving parts of the city where we've got a lot of people of color. We don't want them to be treated unfairly and in a negative way. So that's why this is part of this. We're hoping that some of the money that we have set aside for Employ Milwaukee, that we'll be able to replace some of that with state dollars, which we can then just slide this into the $2.7 million for those companies. Then there's the $10 million for street light repair and upgrades. I think that's self-explanatory. People understand that. $6.2 million to combat reckless driving. This falls into two categories: $5 million for engineering so that we can do more work with the Department of Public Works. Just to give you an example, if you go to North Avenue has essentially one lane of traffic except for a stretch between 24th and 30th Street where it's two lanes. And so that allows for vehicles to just really ramp it up in that area. We want to do more traffic calming. We want to have more pedestrian walks. We want to make this a safer city. So we got $5 million towards that, but it can't be just engineering. Some of it has to be enforcement. And so I'm proposing a $1.2 million to help with police overtime and motorcycles and some computer equipment, because we have a very, very serious problem in this community right now with reckless driving. So another item that we would like you to contact the alderman to make sure that they support. So let's jump now to business, because that's an important part of what we're trying to do as well. Next slide, please. Oops, no, we're not going to go to business yet. We're going to go to the small business and economic development. $600,000 for translation and multilingual services. Pretty straightforward. We feel we need to do more, particularly for our Hispanic population, for our Hmong population, to have better, faster, more accurate translation services. The $10 million for the health department for vaccination and pandemic response costs. We don't know whether this is going to be enough. There might be more that's going to be necessary depending on what happens with the Delta variant and others. But this is a very serious concern. We've also seen the impact that all this has had on access to food. And so we've got $2 million to sustain family food access through some of our existing partnerships. So that's where some of this money would be going to as well. Let's keep going. Small business. We have been successful in directing a significant number of loans to our small businesses. In the CARES Act, we got over $15 million in essence out to our small businesses. We want to get $7 million for Restart 3 for business grants, and another $2.5 million to extend the lifeline funding through the diverse chambers of commerce. And at this point, I'd like to ask Marjorie Rucker to talk a little bit about business support and why she sees this as a necessary component to this program. Marjorie.
Good evening, everyone. So the Ethnic and Diverse Business Coalition consists of 18 ethnic and diverse chambers of commerce that serve ethnic and diverse businesses in the state of Wisconsin. There are 9 entities that are included in our proposal to the city that serve specifically in the city of Milwaukee. Our funding will help hundreds of ethnic and diverse businesses in the city of Milwaukee strengthen the infrastructure and provide the lift necessary for these businesses to recover from COVID-19 and to set them on a real trajectory for growth. Currently, nationwide, 1 in 3 minority businesses are closing their doors daily, and Milwaukee is no exception. So it's imperative to expand and continue the necessary operational and capacity building support to assist all ethnic and diverse-led chambers of commerce, as well as organizations within the city of Milwaukee that work tirelessly for ethnic and diverse businesses here. For equity in the city of Milwaukee to continue, the money that we requested will go to support those ethnic and diverse led organizations as well as businesses. Grants are not enough to assist with the recovery and growth of ethnic and diverse businesses in the city of Milwaukee. The $7.5 million is great. Businesses will appreciate it, but technical assistance and financial access or access to capital go hand in hand. So the organizations in this proposal provide high quality technical assistance or financial products, and equally important, upend the racial inequities in the traditional financial sector to catalyze change so that ethnic and diverse businesses can economically recover and thrive here in Milwaukee.
Thanks, Marjorie. Thank you very, very much. All right, let's jump ahead. Again, these are items that are still in our summer program, because we think these are ones that are high priority items that we would like to see funding as quickly as possible. And so if the council would take this up in September, that they're tentatively scheduled a hearing for September 2nd, and we'd love to have the support of people, because we think this is a really solid package that we want to make sure that the councilmen know that there's community support for as well. One of the areas where we've seen a demand for more services is in the area of violence prevention and interruption expansion. And so we're putting $3 million into our Office of Violence Prevention to help us, in particular on the south side, to make sure that we're working on violence prevention and interruption as well. We want to have that expanded. We think that that is money that's worthwhile spent. $2 million, pretty straightforward stuff here for city cleanup and beautification programs. We know that this can be when you see visual blight, that can lead to physical blight as well. We're dealing with racial equity, as I said, throughout this, and so we want to make sure that we're really analyzing it. So we have $1 million for that. And as I said earlier, I've been frustrated by how difficult it's been on the broadband front. So we're starting out with $100,000 to do some implementation planning to help us see what we can do. Our issue here is a little different from some rural areas. There might be technically coverage throughout the city, but the question is it the same type of internet coverage that we all have that are listening to this presentation? And the answer to that is no. In some parts of the city, it's much worse. And I think that creates more to the digital divide that we're seeing, and I want to address that ultimately. So let's keep moving forward. One of my passions remains early childhood education. Again, this is an area where I think we have to work more closely with the state, with the schools to come up with a coherent package. But we want to show our commitment in our early package. And so we've got $1.2 million for community-focused career paths for early childhood education, in particular, making sure that young men have access to this, because this is an area where we need to have more educators involved in this. In addition, $300,000 for K-12 technical college dual enrollment and certification, something working with MATC to make sure that we get, again, more people trained so we can have better, more high quality childcare throughout the entire community. We can keep going. So just in summary, the phase one, which is the summer package, it really, in my mind, kicks off some important efforts to help Milwaukee sustain recovery and address issues driven by the pandemic. There are other parts of this program that I'll just touch on. Energy efficiency upgrades, and these are targeted. This is what I was talking about, making homes more energy efficient. We're doing this by targeting qualified census tracts. We want to have the focus in the central city where we think that we can have much more penetration. I mentioned the compliance loan program and how much I like that, the violence prevention, the reckless driving. All these are quality of life, but they're more than quality of life. They really, I think, improve the quality of life for people throughout the community. And that will allow us in the next phase to do some big ticket items on things like housing and on lead abatement, which is where we want to go with the next portion of the package. So again, let's move forward here. And that will be in the next phase. We want to be working with Community Coalition on lead abatement strategy and partnership. Again, more workforce, more testing, physician partnerships and prevention. Affordable housing investment remains a very, very high priority for me, and leveraging existing programs. That's where, going back to the Housing Authority, leveraging those commitments and those partnerships, I think, is important. We want to focus on renovating some city-owned homes, and that means homes that may be on the demolished list, but we can get them off the demolished list if we put dollars into them. But that doesn't mean we're going to avoid demolishing some homes. But I think that we can have a significant dent with funding, with a housing package that we're going to present later this fall. We also want to be working with our Office of Environmental Collaboration for low energy modular housing. Eric Scheinberger has done a great job in developing this, and we're going to continue to work with him. These packages are not the only packages. We know that there's an infrastructure package that has now made its way through the US Senate. Hopefully it will make its way through the House in a similar form or a better form, and that we'll be able to maximize the benefit for even more investment in the city of Milwaukee based on that. So we're eager about that, and we're working closely with Congresswoman Moore. We're working closely with Senator Baldwin to see what we can do to advance that. But at the end of the day, we can go to the next slide here. I believe that the American Rescue Plan will make a generational difference for Milwaukee. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about tonight, for some people, isn't sexy, but it really is quality of life. And from right to counsel to making sure that we're getting people trained, making sure that we're doing what we can for reckless driving, making sure we're doing what we can for streetlights, that's all about quality of life. So our summer program meets the critical needs for Milwaukee now, and I think it's a strong start. Again, there's more to come, but again, we ask you to please contact the council, let them know how important it is for them to take this up, and that's what we're hoping to do. So with that, I don't know if we have the capacity for questions or not. I'm gonna ask Aaron or someone here, where does this leave us right now? Do we have the capacity for some written questions, or?
Mayor, there's a couple of questions in here if you want to take them.
Sure.
There's some questions, specific questions about West Lawn and rents there, and we can follow up with those folks. There's a question from Jeremy Jones. How's this plan utilizing the communities most affected by COVID-19 to get action done? So how are we going to be able to engage residents and connect them with any of these programs, especially in those communities that were hit hard by COVID-19?
Well, that's exactly part of what we're trying to do tonight. We want the more people we can talk to, the more people we can get involved in this effort, I think the stronger this package will be. And we specifically asked to have these 6 or 7 partners with us tonight because they all have ties in the community as well. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that the people who are most affected negatively through the COVID pandemic are probably the ones that have the least amount of ties to city government or to the levers of power in this community. And so I deliberately, with Nikki Purvis, have said we have to do this through an equity lens. This has to be done through an equity lens. That's exactly where the council is coming from. I think that's where the community is coming from. We recognize these investments have to be made in the central city, both on the north side and on the south side. And we want that to happen. And so we're asking everybody to help us move this forward.
All right, Mayor, I don't see any more questions, so.
All right. Well, again, we'll give a minute or two if anybody has any other questions. Otherwise, we really appreciate all the speakers who were with us tonight and all the work that was done by our staff internally to make this a reality. So there's more work to be done. So again, thank you all very, very much and have a safe night. Thank you.